Hi Year 7, this is Mr. Tapley here for your next lesson of Year 7 History in Term 3. This lesson we are looking at ancient Australia and the geography of ancient Australia, so the land that they were living in, the environment, developing our understanding of how the ancient Australians were influenced by the land, the wildlife and the climate in ancient Australia. There's a saying that we are formed by our environment, and that's very much true of the ancient Australians. They would look very, very different if they were living in Russia or Antarctica or the Amazon rainforest in South America. So the unique climate, the unique weather, the rain, the plants, the animals that we found in Australia very much influenced their society, how they lived and how they developed over time. And that's what we're looking at today. So we're connecting the geographical features of the land to the cultures, the traditions of the ancient Australians. Ancient Australia, a changing environment. So the landscape and the climate of ancient Australia was constantly changing throughout history. So obviously it changes in the seasons. This greatly influenced how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities lived. If you look at a map of Australia that shows you the different types of environments in Australia, we're very different to other countries. Other countries, it's often just one or two different types of environments. So you've got the hot part of the country and the cold part. Australia, you will see rainforests, deserts, you'll see snow, you'll see grasslands. We've got a lot of different types of environments in Australia, and that greatly influenced the Aboriginals and the Torres Strait Islanders. Now, these Indigenous Australians were referred to as the caretakers of the land. They took care of the land took care of them. And because of their experiences living in a very harsh, very diverse Australian climate, their people are the most knowledgeable about how to live on the land management, and how to find resources like food and water. So they are the most knowledgeable people, basically, of how to live off the land. If you have any questions about how to live, ask those guys. So the movement of tribal camps across the nation was also connected to changing climate. So even placing their tents down here and saying, yep, we're going to live here for a week, we're going to live over there for a week because it gets colder and that's warmer, we're going to move over there because they've got food in the autumn season but not in the winter. So the entire movement of their people throughout history was connected to the land. It was connected to animal migration patterns, so where they thought that food would be, connected to vegetation growth. So okay, we know these types of fruits and vegetables grow in this season, so in this season we're going to live over here, but then we're going to live over here. So they moved all around the country. The term for that is a nomad. So nomad, they had no home because their home was always changing. Their people knew when, where, and how to survive in ancient Australia. Examine the images of different types of environments in Australia on the next slide. Consider how challenging it would be to survive in a changing world. You guys lose your damn minds when we don't have the heater on inside at Glen Waverley. Imagine what it would be like to not just go from hot to cold outside inside the middle school building, but to go from living in a rainforest, traveling to the mountains, traveling to the desert. You've got Uluru there, Ayers Rock. You've got the Snowy Mountains, named that because they are snowy. You've got beaches, all variety of types of environments in Australia. Very difficult to live there when you have to change your way of life every day. So, what's one of the ways that the ancient Australians managed the land? How did they manage living in this many different environments? Fire. The use of fire has shaped our national landscape, literally shaped it. The fire was used by the Indigenous Australians in farming, in hunting. They would use it to communicate to each other through smoke signals, and they would use it in war. Obviously, it was used as a weapon. Now, the concept of fire stick farming refers to the practice of setting fire to the grasslands. So they would quite literally get a torch, and they'd go whoosh, and the fire would take away part of the grassland, part of the forest, part of the brush. Which sounds strange. Intentionally lighting fires sounds very strange. But it was actually very clever. And we still do fire stick farming in 2020. It's part of our bushfire response. Some people argue we don't do enough, that we should do more that the ancient Australians do, like those bushfires we had at the start of the year that were horrible. A lot of people said, well, this wouldn't have happened if the ancient Australians were in charge. We should let the Aboriginals, Torres Strait Islanders lead the path. But anyway, the logic is that if you light very small controlled fires that you can look after in the winter when it's cold and wet, this would prevent uncontrollable, really dangerous fires in the summertime. So the European settlers back in the day would see these guys lighting fires, like, why are they doing that? And then they would see that their part of the land would be a lot safer come summertime compared to the Europeans, the British people. So they're like, oh, we should do that. And that's called fire stick farming. There are also a number of plants and trees in Australia that actually rely on fire farming to be regrown, to be reborn. So the logic behind that is basically that the fire makes the tree fall down. The seeds that are on the top of the tree but can't get to the ground to grow, they've now fallen to the ground. The seeds will also spread on the wind, and now you've got trees growing elsewhere. So all the trees growing in Australia, a lot of them actually need to be lit on fire to regrow, which sounds very strange, but anyway. And that source that I've got there on the side is actually from your textbook. So you can see use of fire by Aboriginal culture. So they would use it to cook food, obviously, to catch animals. You get rid of mosquitoes with fire, which is nice, repel insects. You use it to manufacture tools and weapons such as spears. Sending messages could be used to clean wounds. So if you have a cut and you need to make sure it doesn't get infected, you can use fire to kind of burn the cut, to seal the wound. Lighting the night, obviously, etc., etc., etc. So lots of uses for fire. It's a very powerful tool, and the ancient Australians used it very well, better than most societies. The Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders supported life, not just with fire, you can't eat fire, through a combination of hunting, farming, fishing, and foraging for natural resources, food and water. So their community, their tribe, their people was very unique in that they did all these different things to look after themselves. Most people would just do like one or two things, but these guys were masters of everything. So their communities cultivated a variety of different crops according to the geographic conditions, so the land and the climate in the region. If you guys have ever tried gardening or farming, which you probably haven't in year 7, but anyway, certain types of fruits and vegetables only grow depending on very specific climate. So they can only grow if it's this hot and you get this much rain, and anything else they're just gonna die. So they were very resilient, they were very creative. They said, all right, we're only growing this stuff here, we're only growing this stuff here, and then we can just trade, we can move this stuff around. You give me some bananas, I'll give you some coconuts. They would grow potatoes, a variety of other fruit and vegetables. If farming wasn't possible, they could rely on hunting or foraging and finding food in trees and bushes. It's hard to see from this painting here. You guys looked at that in the previous lesson actually, but you can see the smoke rising up there from the fires that they're starting. And what those fires would do, the fire would push the wildlife, so the animals, out into the open where the Aboriginals could then hunt them more efficiently. So that was how they used fire as a hunting tool. All the tribal groups developed an advanced range of fishing techniques. So obviously Australia is an island. The Torres Strait Islands were, spoiler, islands. So the islanders were going to have a variety of fishing techniques and tools. Spears, traps, and nets. Again, they were the OG fishers. They were much better fishermen than the European settlers when we came over here. Again, we just look over at them, they'd be like, oh, they got way more fish than us. So you have to learn from other civilizations to improve your own. They're people, again, very resilient, very creative to live and prosper in a very harsh, changing environment. So, what we're doing this lesson, bit of reading, bit of questioning. So read through chapter 3.4, and I'll show you where that is in a moment, which is pages 72 to 75, so just 2 or 3 pages, and you're only doing 3 questions. Questions 1, 2, 3 on page 75. And I've actually put a screenshot of those questions in the slides, so you don't have to kind of keep going back and forth between the textbook and the slides and blah, 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 blah. Anyway. So you're putting these into your digital notebook. Question 1 asks you, why did Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have to develop so many methods of hunting and managing the land? Question 2, this one's a bit confusing. You need to put the following sentences into correct order. So from 2A all the way down to 2G, you've got all these different sentences that form one paragraph of information about ancient Australia and geography, about the land, how they managed it. So what you need to do is put those letters in order. So basically when you're writing this in your digital notebook, you don't have to rewrite the whole thing. You can if you want to, if that's easier for you. You just need to go, okay, A is first, C is next, then it's B, then it's G, etc. So you can see you've got different sentences about history, about archaeological excavations. Some of this stuff is related to fishing, farming, hunting, etc. So you just need to read through each sentence and decide this one goes first, this one goes second. Try reading them out loud if you're having trouble with this one, and that will help you see, okay, that doesn't make sense if I say it out loud. That needs to go there, there, there. Cool? It sounds complicated, but really all you're going to have for question 2 is a series of letters. A goes first, then B, C, blah, 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 blah. Question 3. How many seasons are shown in source 1? And I'll show you where that is in a moment. List them and show beside each the corresponding months of our calendar. So let's go find chapter 3, 3.4 I should say. So this is chapter 3.4. You can see it's got stuff about the fire farming, about hunting and farming. Those are the questions that we're reading through now. And question 3 is asking you to look at this, source 1, that big colorful looking wheel there. And what that wheel is, as it says here, is it shows you the different seasons that Aboriginals and Torres Strait Islanders had in Australia. So they would have different seasons. They had different names, you can see. I'm not going to pronounce them. But this inner ring here, so Goodwedge, and I'm not going to pronounce them. Those are the seasons that the ancient Australians referred to. So they didn't say summer, spring, winter. They would say those ones. So what you need to do there is, question 3. Oops, I went too far. How many seasons are shown in source 1? So how many Indigenous Australian seasons were there on their calendar? List them, and then show beside each the corresponding months of the calendar. So for example, Goodwedgejig is January, February, March. And you can see under each of them, it shows you what sort of weather they had and what sort of animals and plants they would use to farm and to hunt and to live during those months. So that's what you're doing this lesson, guys. If you have any questions about that, please let me know. Otherwise, best of luck and cheers.